Oh shit. Oh God. This whole thing was on mute.
We got it. It's not the same. Essentially, an error raising error. Then also,
Okay, so let me start over again. So, in a nutshell, everything that Donald Trump said tonight about elections and the way our elections work was a lie. First, there was no Chinese interference in the 2020 general election. 81,268,924 Americans, including yours truly, voted for President Biden. Period. That was our choice. Also, 75,017,613 Americans voted for Vice President Harris in 2024. Once again, that was our choice. Nobody took anything from this man. No election procedures were done improperly. Let me give you an example of kind of how this works. So the so the first thing I want to focus on is we have a constitutional and statutory framework for how we do elections. In a nutshell, it's basically the instruction manual. The first part of the instruction manual is the electors clause in Article 1. State legislatures determine the time, place, and manner of conducting elections. Second is Article 4, Section 4, the Republican form of government clause. So, what does that mean in a sense? Every state must maintain a Republican form of government. What is a Republican form of government? The government we have at the federal level. That is the, in a nutshell, that is what we have at the state level with the judiciary in the state, the executive in the state, who's a governor instead of a president, and the state legislature. Now, the state legislature does not have independent authority to operate above their other two co equal branches of government because of Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, the Republican form of government clause. Those states have passed laws or within the state constitutions have adopted laws that govern how within each state you do elections. The election administration has then actually been through statute or through constitution has been given to individual elected officials, or in some cases like Pennsylvania, an appointed official who runs that Bureau of Elections, Secretary of State with a Department of Elections. The executive branch, through that Secretary of State or Elections Director, or the governor through emergency powers that may be granted in their state constitution or in the state statutory law, has the ability to make determinations that may impact elections, but all that is legal. So then there's a little thing called Marbury v. Madison, which is called judicial review. That decision in 1803 basically established the ability for the legislature and executive actions to be interpreted by the judiciary. That principle goes from federal courts to state courts. So you've heard people like in Pennsylvania, the MAGA folks lied about the state legislature improperly expanded absentee balloting through state statute, and they tried to overturn it. That wasn't illegal. That's proper. And the state courts properly ruled that it was legal. Now, additionally, like I said, you have state constitutions and statutory laws, but you also have the 10th Amendment, which grants states all powers that aren't given to Congress and the federal government. And then you have the 12th, 14th, 15th, 19th, and 26th Amendments, which affect different aspects of election law, equal protection, due process, voting for people age 18 and over, and the fact that poll taxes and other discriminatory practices to prevent people from voting are removed. So those are things that you have that are in effect. So no state, from a MAGA state to a Democratic majority voting state, did anything illegal in their elections. So that's the first thing. So the second thing is the lie that China or other entities interfered in the 2020 election. So here's a little known thing that came out that if you're not a data nerd like me, you might not know. In March 2020, because of an executive order that Trump signed before he left office in January 2021, that required the intelligence community, all the intelligence agencies with real intelligence people doing real intelligent work, to review the 2020 election to see if there was any vote flipping, machine manipulation, or interference by a foreign government. They issued their report on March 10th, 2021. There was none. Foreign governments try to encourage people to vote in different ways, but they didn't interfere with the voting process. They didn't change voter registration. They didn't change ballot totals. They didn't change electoral results. So everything that this 80-year-old man said tonight about that are things that are made up by a small number of people who want to believe that if people vote different than what they believe, that those votes are illegitimate. Also, he's lying about this belief that there's a batch of documents that were covered up that prove his point, because his people like Bill Pulte and Kash Patel and John Solomon and just the worst of the worst in terms of intellectual capacity are taking an email from here, a statement from there, a individual who looked at something and wrote a statement on it in the intelligence review, and they're taking these little pieces and saying, oh, this is a cover-up. You know what that would be like? That would be like you saying, hey, I think my wife's sister is cute. You're not dating your wife's sister. You're not even trying to date your wife's sister. But because you made the statement that your wife's sister is cute, somebody creates a grand conspiracy that you're cheating on your wife. That's what they're doing, people. That's what they're doing. So, like I said, in 2020, nobody tried to change votes. Russia and Iran, Russia and China tried to influence people to vote for Trump. Iran tried to influence people to vote against Trump. Well, you do that with social media. Hell, social media is throughout everything. I'm on social media right now talking to you. Some of you all may believe what we're saying at the future today and tomorrow. That's a way of influence. Some of you may not believe it. That's influence as well, influencing you to believe what we're saying or not what we're saying. But all of this was reported on, and there's a full detailed report that was declassified. So there was no information that was hidden. Saying that because somebody who is in an elected position wrote an email to somebody else saying, I don't like Donald Trump, that's not evidence of a grand conspiracy. That's bullshit. Bullshit. I don't like Donald Trump. I'm a 10th generation African American citizen. Does that mean that my citizenship should be in question? I didn't like Ronald Reagan. Am I somehow a traitor? Come on. Next, there's been at least 10 billion votes cast in general elections since 1980. There's been roughly 600 incidences of somebody actually voting illegally, casting a ballot that they shouldn't have cast. That's less than 100 millionth of a percent. That's a whole lot of zeros in front of that number. A million would be six, and one, so seven. So that's like 9 zeros before you get to that one. After the decimal point, so it's 0.00000000001, and then other numbers after that. That's in effect no election fraud. If you want to say that those 600 people somehow cut off 600 American votes or canceled out 600 American votes out of 10 billion ballots, you know what? Take my legitimate vote since I was able to vote starting in 1990, which is at least 40 elections that I voted in between local, off year, midterm, and presidential election years, and say that, well, my 40 should then be zeroed out because of those 600. So now that's 560. Come on, people. That's bullshit. When people say, well, if one person does something wrong, that all 10 billion should be considered illegitimate? Seriously? If you're one of the people who didn't vote for Donald Trump or MAGA, you should feel a certain kind of way because these people are telling you you ain't shit, that your votes don't matter, that you're not someone who matters in their America. I'm a 10th generation African American citizen. My family was brought here, my mother's family was brought here to South Carolina from Madagascar in roughly 1725. We've been here 301 years, longer than Donald Trump's family, who came here in the middle to late 1890s, at least 170 years more. This is more my country than it is theirs. Under no circumstances is my vote illegitimate. When I vote, I actually even record my vote now and share it online because I want people to see that I'm voting the way that I'm voting. And it just is annoying and offensive. But I also want to give you all another perspective too. Do you know that our right to vote is not a constitutionally protected right? That's a problem. So you might think that the 14th, 15th, 19th, 23rd, 24th, and 26th Amendment all ensure, and actually I got the 26th Amendment wrong earlier when I implied that it meant dealt with poll taxes. That was the 24th. The Constitution never affirmatively gave us the right to vote as a tie bar of citizenship. So my American citizenship as a 10th generation African American citizen, the right to vote doesn't travel with me like the right to free speech. My right to vote is a grant of the states. And Supreme Courts since the 1870s, from the slaughterhouse cases to Minor v. Hassett to US v. Harris, the civil rights cases, Elks v. Wilkins, McPherson v. Blacker, all the way up through uh, Shelby v. Holder, Batten v. McMaster, Bush v. Gore, have continued the theme that voting is not coexistent with citizenship as an American citizen. That your right to vote is not a right of national citizenship. That the 14th Amendment didn't expand the privileges and immunities of citizenship to voting. That the 15th Amendment did not confer any individual right to vote. It just basically said states can't discriminate or give preferential treatment, that a citizen has no federal constitutional right to vote for president. And unless a state legislature chooses a statewide election as the means to implement its power to vote for members of an electoral college, then you don't have an inherent right as a citizen. That one came from Bush v. Gore, the majority decision in McPherson v. Blacker from 1892, and Minor v. Haberset in 1874. So just think about that. These people who are pushing the Save American Vote, Save America Act, or Save American Vote Act, however they mislabel it, want to require proof of citizenship to vote when your right to vote isn't tied to your citizenship. And let me give you an example of how your right to vote really shows that it's not tied to your citizenship. In a lot of states, if you are a felon, you are not eligible to vote, even though you're a US citizen. You may be a multi-generational citizen, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth generation. That don't mean anything. You got a felony, you can't vote unless you go through. Some states have processes for you to go through, but there are a couple states that it's barred forever once you become a felon. So once again, you want to make sure that only that only citizens can vote, but our right isn't guaranteed as citizens to vote. It's a grant of the states, which is why you have this disparate treatment in different states. Some states have expanded the ability to vote, and some states have restricted it. if it was a right of citizenship, that would be disparate treatment and discrimination that would violate the 14th and 15th Amendment, especially the Equal Protection Clause and the Privileges and Immunities Clause of the 14th Amendment. But they don't want to codify through statutory law or through constitutional amendment. They want to leave it loose so they can play with it. It's like they want to leave the back door open so Freddie or Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees can come in the house and get rid of the Democratic voter, but leave the MAGA Republican voter okay because they have a don't kill me clause. Come on, folks. So, in a nutshell, and I want to give you all some quick stats because I think that this is important to add into the premise. If you see or are hit with the lies that came out of this praised batshit press conference that took place tonight, I'm just waiting on it to load up. In 2024, 241,598 and 19 American citizens were eligible to vote in the November 2024 election. 77,302,580 voted for Donald Trump. That's only 32% of all eligible Americans. 75,017,613 voted for Vice President Harris, 31.05% of the eligible citizens. 2,918,109 voted for third party presidential candidates, 1.21% of the vote. 1,398,093 voted for other candidates down ballot and skipped the presidential part at 0.58% of the vote. 84,961,624 eligible citizens who could have voted didn't vote, which actually was the biggest group, 35.2% of the vote. That's 164,295,439 Americans who were eligible to vote, who voted or didn't vote, but did not pick Donald Trump. 68%. In 2020, 236,705,879 eligible citizens were eligible to vote, American adult citizens. President Biden got 81,268,924. Donald Trump got 74,216,154. President Biden got 34%, 34.3% of the total votes, total eligible citizens. Trump got 31.4%. 2,905,427 voted third party, and 1,712,749 voted for down ballot candidates only. 76,609,727 Americans didn't vote who were eligible to vote. So, in a nutshell, 68.65% of eligible Americans in 2020 who could have voted did not pick Donald Trump and MAGA. We're the majority. We at the Future Today and Tomorrow Super PAC are trying to reach you to get you in the game, to get you open in the fight so that you can be a part of pushing back and using your electoral power, using your economic power, and your societal power in terms of decoupling from these people who believe the lies that came out of Donald Trump's mouth and the lies that are coming out in the information that he's releasing, which is, like I said earlier before, you told someone that your wife's sister is cute, and that's turned into a grand conspiracy that you are sleeping with your wife's sister, her mother, some cousins, an aunt, maybe a play niece, and a play cousin. Come on. But for you all who are in those majorities, we need y'all in the game and we need y'all to feel a certain kind of way because they're telling you that you're not a legitimate American. You're not a equal citizen. Todd Blanche will not fight for you as Attorney General. He won't even acknowledge your American citizenship. Kash Patel will treat you like garbage. He doesn't believe you're an American citizen. Bill Pulte and Jay Clayton don't think that they should use the DNI position to protect all Americans. They only think they should use it to protect the 74 million that Trump got in 2020 and the 77 million he got in 2024. The 81,268,924 who voted for President Biden, screw us. 75 million, what 164 million, 295,439 who voted for VP Harris, third party, down ballot only, or didn't vote. We don't count. Boycott MAGA related businesses, vote in every election, do not listen to the lies, get out and vote. And lastly, cut off these folks. I've cut out some MAGA people out of my life, and you know what? I feel good. I'm really good at cutting people out of my life. And I don't recommend it for everybody, but I'm just saying there has to be economic costs, there has to be voting costs by voting against the candidates who tell you you ain't shit because you don't vote for MAGA, and societal costs by cutting off relationships, engagement, and other activities with people who support somebody or support a group of people who believe that you're less than a citizen, you're less than a person, you're less than an American, you're less than worthy. We'll be putting out some more videos. I'm sorry that when I initially started this, that I had this on mute on the Zoom portion, but we'll work to edit that out and get rid of that part and put this out on the Substack and on the other channels that we have for the Future Today and Tomorrow on LinkedIn and Facebook and other places. But visit www.futurepac.today. We're here to work, to push, to try to save our country and stand against this bullshit and these lies. Everybody have a blessed evening. I'm gonna get out this suit and I pray for you all and pray for our country and pray that we can stand against these tyrants who want to take away the rights of non-MAGA Americans. Thank you.